So I penciled in a few things here I was going to talk about, but I'm not going to get too much into it because I'd rather take a few moments to talk about our distinguished first honoree that we're going to present the award to today. A few anecdotal stories, one that's related to our committee work and one that's sort of personalized for our viewing pleasure here today. As many of you that know me, I'm a proud Hoosier, even though I've lived out here for 25 years and met my bride here in Washington working on the Hill. I started in 1988 working for our junior senator at the time, Dan Quayle, who went on to become vice president. And at that time, I met a young aspiring congressman who had a full head of brown hair back in those days by the name of Mike Pence, and who's now our sitting vice president. So I've had a pretty good run. And I can tell you back in those days, it wasn't all glory and glamour. I spent most of my time living in Mike's basement, feeding his dog, taking out the trash, and getting his car washed because his wife didn't want us driving around the district in a dirty old car. So it wasn't all glory. But what brings me to introduce our guest of honor is that we were at a candidate training school in Cincinnati, Ohio in the winter of 1989. And I was sitting with people who went on to much better careers than I had, which people by the name of Mary Madeline and Mike Murphy, who you may see on the talk shows on occasion still these days. And I remember sitting with them in the bar of the hotel the night that our distinguished honoree was first elected in a special election in 1989 in Congress. And we stood and cheered the first Latino woman to be elected to Congress. Little did I know in those days that I was going to go on to serve with her for many, many years, side by side, at the Foreign Affairs Committee in the House of Representatives. And what a great run it was for me to see her as a champion for years and years for freedom and liberty and human rights and democracy. And there's never been a voice stronger than hers, whether it's in committee hearings, markups, or on the House floor, championing bills that meant a lot to us in this community. And she continues to be a champion in her upcoming chairmanship on the Middle East and North Africa. When we tell a quick funny story that she'll remember with fondness, and I know Eddie and Nathan and some of the others here probably remember it too. The day that we marked up the Venezuela sanctions bill we first passed a few years back, I think it was in December of 2014, which passed unanimously, I might say. I was driving to work that day, and I remember passing cars and vans on the way up on 395 with the Venezuelan flags flapping in the wind, and I'm like, are they coming to our hearing today, our markup? By golly, if they weren't coming for our hearing and our markup. And I never will forget having sat through countless hearings and markups in that room, seeing the electric atmosphere that day when we passed Ms. Ros-Lehtinen's bill for sanctions on Venezuela for gross human rights violations, which they richly deserved, and we doubled down on those. And so the room was filled with cheers and tears that day, and it was really an emotional time, and it really meant a lot to me to see that and to see our awardee championing that bill. But the best part of that story was what happened afterward. Ms. Ros-Lehtinen took the time, I think, to pose for pictures and selfies with everybody in that room. And I think I even saw her at one point grab the camera and take some photos herself of people who were there, who were driven up from Florida and down from New York that day. And that's the memory I'll always have. It was a special day. Almost brought tears to my eyes. And then a little bit of a personal note. She may not remember this, but I will never forget it. My wife's from Thailand. She's a diplomat here, and fortunate to have met her through my work. And she had a period of time a few years back where we had some personal family health issues that I needed to attend to, and Ms. Ros-Lehtinen didn't hesitate. I'm getting a little emotional, but she told me to go take care of my family, whatever it took. We'd be waiting for you when you get back, Mark. And I was gone for quite a while, but she was true to her word. And when I came back, I was welcomed with open arms and didn't skip a beat. And that I'll always remember. That was a special time, and she was very gracious about that. So I was fortunate last night to have met Max Manwaring, who our award has been named after, and his lovely bride quickly over drinks last evening. And I'm really fortunate to have met him and to be a part of this group and have our first award named after him. And I cannot think of a better recipient of our inaugural Max Manwaring Award for Distinguished Public Service to this champion of liberty and freedom, not just for Cuba, not just for Venezuela, but all around the world. Rep. Ileana Ros-Lehtinen from Florida.
So much.
So sorry
and I
that
give you a hug, but I'm under the weather.
so sorry that she's retiring, but trust me when I tell you her voice will not be extinguished for many, many years to come.
Thank you. Let's take a photo here with our award. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, guys. Thank you. I'm a little bit under the weather here. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. You're so sweet. Thank you.
Please bear with her. She's a little bit under the weather, but she still was gracious enough to come today and
you
receive
bet.
our inaugural award.
Thank you so much. My golly. Thank you. Mark, here we go. I appreciate it so much. We miss him so much in our committee. He was working with Congressman Burton and Congressman Duncan, and he's such a good guy. And I'm so glad that he's doing well. And we love you and we miss you. We miss you. But you've moved on to bigger and better things. So I'm a little bit under the weather, so I didn't do my usual working the tables because I don't want to give you this. But I'm going to soldier through with my bad throat because I did not want to cancel out on this remarkable award. And I thank you so very much. Muchísimas gracias. Tremendo honor. Thank you to Joseph as well and to everyone at the Center for a Free, Secure Society and the Daniel Morgan Graduate School for this beautiful award. Where did it go? Did you take it from me already? Okay, thanks. I'm just kidding. But you're guarding it. Good. I like it. But you're so right. Dr. Manwaring has been at the forefront of fighting Western Hemisphere security challenges for such a long time. He's had a distinguished career, and it's an honor to receive an award that bears his name. Incredible. And when we talk about security challenges in Latin America, it's hard not to begin with my native homeland of Cuba. Like so many Cubans who came to Miami, my family and I were fortunate to escape the Castro regime, a regime that, as we've seen over the years, will do whatever it takes to stay in power. Torture, murder, espionage, propaganda, repression, it doesn't matter to them. They just want to stay in power. And get ready, because in February, tell all your friends, this is going to be a major rollout of the Castro regime, of their supposed transfer of power. No elections. You might have missed the elections. There won't be any from now till February. But they're already, while Cuba is actually crumbling, physically crumbling, they are redoing their version of the Capitol, and so that it will look just splendid with the red carpet for the new regime official to take over. Meet the new boss, same as the old boss. Nothing changes there. And just yesterday, what an incredible day we had. We met with Cuban dissidents and former political prisoners, Cuban dissidents, those who were permitted to come to this briefing, because not everybody is allowed to leave. That's why the regime has such power over people. They decide whether you can leave for just 24 hours or a month or not at all. And they described the crimes against humanity in a briefing that we had that are still happening on the island. You know, when we talk about the Cold War and the days of war of old, that's still Cuba today. You know that. Now, under the previous administration, we made concession after concession. You know that. And what did we demand in return? Nada. Zip. Zilch. Nada at all. And the Cuban regime felt emboldened. As well they should be. They felt like, hey, we own this place. There's no problem. And now we're going to get cash from the Yankees. This is great. But the new administration is attempting to right that wrong, slowly but surely. The president has made the right choice by withdrawing many of our diplomats from Cuba, from that so-called embassy, as a result of what the regime has been doing. Sonic attacks, physical attacks against our personnel that has impacted dozens, and the doctors say that they believe that it will be with lifelong damages. And he has also expelled regime officials from the United States because this so-called embassy is nothing but a network of spies, just like the embassy, the consulate that they have in New York and everywhere. The president has rolled back some of the regulations, and more importantly, the administration has expressed solidarity with the people of Cuba and not with the regime. Do you remember that sickening video of Obama and Raul Castro doing the wave in a baseball game? I don't think that we're in any danger of seeing this administration do that. And so it's been a very important change. And we've got to remember the fundamentals. We got to go back to the basics, always go back to the basics. Castro is an avowed enemy of the United States. He says it. He says it every time. They've done nothing to protect our diplomats. That is today in present day. Not talking about past crimes. Cuba's military apparatus, the intelligence apparatus, they have exported their abusive tactics and espionage activities throughout the hemisphere. And where can we see it manifested so clearly? In Venezuela. And I was talking to a lady out there from Venezuela, and she knows the Cuban authorities are running amok in that country. It is they're aiding and abetting Nicolás Maduro and his corrupt regime. The nicest thing you can say about them is that they're corrupt. Maduro's attempt to undermine the duly elected National Assembly to prevent opposition leaders from leaving the country. He holds those visas. It's the playbook of Castro, continuing this narco state drug trafficking enterprise. When we travel around Central America, all of the leaders tell us they're so worried about the drug production going up in Colombia, fueled by Venezuela, and going up through Central America. And the threats are emanating from Venezuela. Venezuela has drug kingpins. They're running a sovereign country. They're the ones in charge. And this is absurd, and it cannot be tolerated. But it is tolerated because as long as Maduro is exporting his oil, these so-called leaders of democratic elected governments, they'll go along with him. But we in the U.S., we've stepped up our pressure through sanctions, and it is positive that Canada and now the European Union have stepped up their sanctions as well. That was amazing, but more must be done. This is just the beginning. We've got to sanction those entities that are helping Maduro. And first on the list has to be Daniel Ortega of Nicaragua. A legislation that I have authored with Ted Cruz from Texas seeks to hold the Ortega regime accountable for his human rights abuses. We're always looking at Cuba, Venezuela, as well we should, at Ecuador, Bolivia, important. But let's look at Nicaragua, so close to us. And the NICA Act we passed in the House already, and it's time for the Senate to act. The Ortega family is running the country with an iron fist. It's controlling the Electoral Council. It's controlling the judiciary. It's controlling every other institution in order to prevent the people of Nicaragua from determining their own future, because that's the playbook of all the dictators. It doesn't matter where they're from. They want to make sure that they have the power and not the people. To make matters worse, Ortega has even let the Russians set up a facility in Managua to undermine our interest in the region. It doesn't get much play, except with good institutions like yours. But we've got to pay attention. We've got to sanction PDVSA and its subsidiary, which is all around us, Albaniza, because I believe that Maduro is parking his money in Nicaragua to evade U.S. sanctions. Follow the money. And lastly, we can't forget about foreign fighters. How many people know, I know in this room many will know, but outside this room, that Trinidad and Tobago has the largest amount of ISIS fighters per capita in the world? Is that not amazing to hear? And this well-known fact that Venezuela hands out passports to the highest bidder. Heaven knows how many foreign fighters are coming in to our hemisphere. with these Venezuelan passports. And my staff traveled to the Caribbean a few weeks ago, and what they found was surprising. A growing influence of the Chinese in the Caribbean, Venezuela forgiving Petrocaribe debt in an attempt to keep favors with the smaller islands, and citizenship by investment programs that do not collect biometric information. And they're coming in, and we don't know who they are. Iran and its proxy Hezbollah also have a presence in our Western Hemisphere, taking advantage of weak institutions, corrupt governments to set up shop and expand their narco-terror networks. Ever since the 80s, and then most obviously with the bombing of the Israeli embassy and the EMEA Jewish Community Center in Buenos Aires, Argentina, in the 90s, Iran has been working to gain a foothold in Latin America to undermine U.S. interests. Hezbollah engages in widespread drug trafficking throughout the region in order to fund its terror activities and has close ties with the vice president of Venezuela. Iran is also making diplomatic inroads in our hemisphere. This should frighten all of us, staffing up their embassies all throughout the region. Do you think that there are many Latin Americans who are going to use that embassy to get their visas to travel to Iran? Of course not. These are not visa shops. These are spy shops, network shops of terror financing, sharing intelligence with other U.S. anti-entities. So the transnational nature of these threats must not be underestimated. These countries protect each other at all of these international fora. They share lessons. How can we avoid sanctions? Well, this is what we did. How can we share some best practices for staying in power? Well, this is what we did. And you see this playbook throughout the region. They prop each other up through financial assistance. All of these countries are cooperating, and for far too long, the United States and democratic countries have been too slow to respond. No más, no more. It is time that we start giving the Western Hemisphere the attention it deserves before it is too late for us. Muchísimas gracias por este premio. Muy agradecida. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mark. Thank you. You're very nice.